Our application finally has a way for you to sign up and sign in. Now it's time for us to lock down certain areas of the application based on your authentication and also to tie data to our users. If you recall from the last episode, we have the ability to come over here and to sign in using either Facebook or email or password, and that'll get us into here to where we can go and take a look at the songs, but you could have looked at these without being logged in. So that's kind of a problem. So today we're going to solve that. Songs are going to be something that you can only look at when you're logged in. And then we're also going to tie songs to a user. That's going to require us to restructure how we're storing data inside of Firebase. It's not going to be a huge deal. I apologize if you have really important songs in your testing database, but we're going to restructure how things are actually kept. And that'll allow us to really sandbox this so nobody has to worry about their content being found by somebody else. So to get started, let's take a look at routes and get that routing figured out to where we can have some authentication around it. So up to this point, we've simply been using the actual route. So if you look here, we'll have this route is all over the place. And that's fine. This component is fantastic. It does so much for us and we really enjoy it. But the beautiful thing about components are they really just need to return JSX. So we can actually create our own custom routes that return a route as their actual return value. So we're going to come up to the top of the class here and we're going to create our own type of route. So we're going to do function, then I'm going to call this an authenticated route. And inside of here, we're going to do some interesting things. So it's going to have a component. And we're going to deconstruct this and name the variable component with a capital C. And we're going to do that so that we can dynamically initialize a component inside of JSX. And then it's going to take an authenticated value. And then we're just going to store the rest of the values in the hash, or the attributes, if you will, as rest. And that'll get us pretty far. And then from in here, we just need to return some JSX. So we will return a route as the top level thing. And then we want to continue passing on all the values that were passed into our route. And this will make more sense once we actually use the authenticated route. But we're going to pass the rest of these things on. And then we are going to define the render function right here that's going to take these props. And I don't know if we've ever talked about these, but these props come from the router itself. And they contain things like a location, or if there's query parameters, those kind of things are in these particular props from a route. We always receive those. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to do authenticated, which we will get from our actual application state here in a moment. If it's true, then we will render our component with a capital C with expanding our props that were passed in, and then also expanding the rest. So what this means is that we can utilize our authenticated route and then set what would normally look like props if we were just creating a standard JSX component. And those will be set on our final component the way we expect them to be. And then they will also get the extra props that come from the router. So if you're not logged in though, we're going to redirect you to the login path. And then we need to close that off. So that gives us our route. And then if we go back down to, well, I guess we need to actually bring in redirect so it doesn't blow up for that. So we bring in redirect, and then we can go down into our routes here, and we're going to take the songs and make this an authenticated route. So authenticated route, and then we want it to be exactly songs, and then this render stuff goes away. We're going to have the component with a lowercase c is actually just going to be song list. And then before we had to define render so that we could actually add props to our song list. Well, we kind of already did that in our authenticated route. So this render function goes away. And then it gets us songs, which is just this.state.songs. So let's save that, make sure everything actually compiles, and it does. And when we come over and we take a look at songs, you'll see that we're not getting anywhere, and that's because we didn't actually pass along the authenticated value. So this is getting a little bit long for a single line, so I'm going to spread this out. And then we can add authenticated in here. And this is going to equal this.state.authenticated. So if we save that again, everything compiles and we come back over here, we're currently signed in based on what the header thinks. So if we click songs, it should take us to songs, and that works out. So now when we log out, if we try to go to songs directly, it'll take us to a login path, and then we can log in with Facebook again, and that sends us back. That's not the ideal situation though. It would be really nice if when we tried to go to a restricted route like /songs, that it would know to kind of pass that along, and then when we do finally get logged in, it would send us back to where we wanted to go. Thankfully, we can get our application to do that by doing a couple small tweaks. So if we go back to our authenticated route, and we come up here to the redirect, right now it's taking a string that is to login, but this can actually take an object. Whoa. So if we clean this out and we set up an object here, it's going to have a path name, and this is basically what you're used to seeing as the to, and so this will be our login. And then you can set other things on this, and what'll happen here is this will be set to the value of location on the prop that you end up rendering out. So we're going to render out the login, and that'll have a property of location that will have these values set on it. So we're going to set this as state. You could set this as something else, but this is just what we're going to call it for right now. And then it's going to have props.location. So in this context right here, props is this right here, and this tells us where somebody was trying to go. So this is the current route that we have. This is where they're trying to go. So we're going to add that as the from here. And then what's going to happen is this going to get passed down into our login, and then we can do something with this. So first, let's make sure we have enough closing brackets. And we did not. There we go. Now we have enough. And if we look, everything should compile, but this isn't actually going to work until we go and utilize this inside of login. So let's go to login. And at the top of our render function, we're going to pop off this from. So we'll say const from, and this is going to be this.props.location, because remember, that's what you can basically think of. If you redirect to something, it's going to, in the end, have a location prop passed on from the router. So we want to pop off state, or we want to get the from path name. And so what we're doing here is we're setting a default so that our code that we're about to write will actually work no matter what. So in this case, you can see that from is going to be an object that's going to have a dot path name. But if you remember, we can set to be an object. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to set to be from, which I might read a little weird. Maybe from's not the best name for this variable, but for right now, that's what we're going to go with. And so if we save this now, let's go give this a shot. We want to log out, and then we want to go to a restricted route. So that'll be /songs. And then we want to log in, and hopefully it should send us back to the songs route. And it kind of tried to do something because it sent us back to login. And that means it probably went to the songs route before it actually was authenticated. And so the problem here is that the auth event from Firebase is actually firing a little bit too slow in comparison to our redirect. So we are signing in as indicated by the header, but we're being redirected before the authentication state is popped in. So to get around this, what we're going to do is when somebody logs in, we're going to take the user information that we get back from our promises that we have from the Firebase application, and we're going to use that to set some state inside of app that will be there temporarily until the on-auth state changed event fires, and then it will update itself to the real data regardless. So we have to go back into application, so back into app, and we're going to add a little bit more state. So right now we have authenticated songs loading. We are going to add a current user and set it to null by default. And I'm going to sort these just so they're alphabetical. I'm a little anal about this, I guess. So we're going to sort those. And then just like we have these other things, we're going to set a new function that is set current user. It's going to take a user. This will say if user, else this dot set state, and we want to set the values that we're going to care about. So we are not currently using current user, but we will at some point. And we want to set the authenticated value to true. And remember, like I said, even though we're setting it right here, and somebody could technically manually call this in our React application, it would be overwritten in the case that an auth state event happened. So if there is no user, then we can copy this, and we'll just set it to be the opposite. So this will be null again, and this will be false. So that gets us going there. And then since we're working with this current user thing anyway, we might as well pull it into here and set it up. So this will be user. And down here, this will be null. And I suppose it doesn't hurt to sort these out too. So we have all of those saved, and that's fine. So the last thing we need to do is we need to pass on this set current user function to our login so that it can actually utilize it, which means that we need to create a render function, because the way that the normal routes work is you can't pass along these extra props. So we're going to say render, and you have to get the props. And this is going to return a login with set current user equal to this dot set current user. And then we will pass on the props. And this is actually important, because before, when you just set component like we're doing with logout, it automatically gets these props from the router. In our case now, we're even using these inside of login, and they wouldn't be there by default if we didn't do this. If we save that, we're going to actually get an error because set current user doesn't exist, because we didn't bind it up here. Okay. Oh, we didn't actually use it. So let's go back to login. And anywhere we succeed with a user, we're going to actually call this. So we know we have a user in this particular situation. So we're going to say this.props set current user to be user. And then we will do the same thing for Facebook auth when we know that it succeeds. We called it result right here, but it's going to be a user too, so we can store it that way. So let us try this again. We're going to log out, go back to a restricted route. It's going to send us to login. We're going to log in, and it sends us back to songs, and we're logged in. So we're good to go. Just to be thorough here, let's go ahead and test it with the other type of user. So logging in with email password, that works out too. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to give you the ability to create songs. That way we can associate songs with current users. And we're going to do that by actually, I want you to be able to do this from anywhere in the application. So we're going to add a button up here by songs that's just a little plus that opens up a popover that lets you fill in the title of a song, and it'll populate it. And then you'll have to go into the edit view yourself to actually add the content for it. So we're going to get the whole thing set up by passing along add user into the header inside of app.js. So if we go down here, we're going to say, or not add user, add song, sorry. So if we add song and we save that, now when we go to header, we can actually utilize this. And like I said, we're going to use a popover. And this is yet another thing that comes from Blueprint. If you can't tell, I'm really enjoying using some of the built-in tools from Blueprint. But we have a popover. It has a popover interaction kind, which just is click, hover, etc. It has basically an enum for some of those things, and then position so that we can say where we want to put our popover. And this comes from Blueprint.js core. And then we're going to also import another thing, but it doesn't exist yet. So this is going to be new song form from, and then this is relative to the header, new song form. So let's actually set this thing up. We are going to come down to where we have the rest of these buttons, and I want it to be before the divider, so it's right next to new song. And we're going to create the popover component. And there are quite a few keys we need to set on this. So content, this is going to be the target base, or it's not, target and content are two different things for a popover, but this is going to be the thing that's rendered inside of it. We don't really want to put too much stuff in here, and there's going to be a little bit of actual logic here. So this is where our new song form comes in, and this is just going to be a simple component that renders a form that when submitted will say, will actually run add song. So we have the content, and then we want the interaction kind This is going to be popover, intent kind, click, all capital. Is open is something that we're going to use, and that's going to be this.state.popover open. And I'll show you why we're doing this here in a second. And on interaction, oh, nope, that's interaction. We want to run a particular thing. So this is going to provide the state to the function, and then we want to say this.setState popover open state position. It's going to equal position. Then we want it to be below, so it'll be bottom. And then we can actually close that off. So inside of the component, though, is going to be what is rendered inside of the header. So we will create a button with class name, PT button, PT minimal, PT icon add. And then we're going to set an ARIA label so that people know what this is. It says add new song and button. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on. We know we need an add song variable here, and that's just, I didn't feel like doing this.props.add song, but we could do that too. Actually, yeah, we'll just do that. The other thing here is we use some state with this popover open. So we need to add some state, which means we need a constructor. So let's call superprops this.state. And by default, we want the popover to not be open. And then I think I forgot one thing down here. So we have on interaction, but then we also want to be able to close this. So we're going to pass on another thing into this new song form. And this is going to be the post submit handler, which this sounds a little weird, and we're going to call this close popover. But I wanted the idea of this new song form to be something that we could use it somewhere else. And so if there's a post submit handler, it could be anything. It could be a redirect in some case, like if you want to render this on an actual page somewhere. But in our case, we're rendering it in a pop-up. So we wanted to actually close the pop-up. So let's go create a function that can easily do that. It's going to be close popover. Doesn't take any state. Set state popover open false. And then we need to bind this. Okay. So that pretty much covers it. Now let me walk through this a little bit. We kind of talked about it, but whenever you set the isOpen value here, this tells the popover that it should not manage its own state. You're going to manage it for it. And if we didn't have this on interaction, then you would never be able to open this pop-up. So that's one thing to remember. But let's go take a look at what the pop-up actually renders after we create our new song form. So let's do source component new song form.js. This is a React component. And then inside of this div, for now, we are just going to create some text that's really loud and save that. See if we get closer. Oops, I misspelled popover inside of our header. All right, and we're back to being successful. So now when we click this, it opens up a popover. And so we can manage this entire thing. Anything that's inside of here is inside the new song form. So we're really done with the header at this point. So let's go into the new song form. And just because I like to do styles this way, we're going to abstract our styles out into a constant. That's just going to be new song styles. We don't even know what's going to be there yet, but we're going to put it there. So that works. And then inside of here, we're going to do form on submit. And then this is going to do the same sort of thing that we did with our login form. So we're going to say create song event. We actually don't need this. And then we want to store off a ref so that we can clear the form like we did before. So this song form equals form. And that'll be the end of that. So the rest of this we want to label and stuff. So I'm actually just going to go steal it from the login form. Let's take this email label. And let's call this song title. And then anywhere we say email, we're going to say title. And that's not going to make sense for type because type title isn't a thing, but there's a text type, so that works. And then our placeholder, we're just going to put an actual song title, so don't stop believing. Okay, we have that. And then we want another input. It's going to have a style of width 100% to match. Type of submit. Class name. PT button. PT intent. Primary. And then a value of create song. We're going to close this input off. So we need to actually create this create song function. So let's do that now. So takes an event. This is going to do the standard prevent default. And then while we're here, we might as well bind that so it works. Okay, before we get too incredibly far, let's make sure that this thing works. We can call some other things though. So we know that we have a this.props.post submit handler. We can just call that. That's fine. Inevitably, we're going to want to do a this.songform.reset. And then we'll put a console.log in here. Make sure everything compiles. Oh, doesn't compile because we don't have anything here. Let's add some padding of 10 pixels. Save that. Still doesn't. Oh, duh, gotta use it. Okay, now it's compiling. So if we bounce back over here, we take a look. We actually have a pretty decent looking form. So let's open up our inspector, pop this thing open, type some stuff. Okay, it was hit. It closed itself like we expected it to. And if we open it back up, there shouldn't be anything there. So that means all of this stuff worked kind of as we expected. So we need to implement the actual useful part of this, which is going to be pretty easy for us. We're going to pop off the value that we want for title. This is going to be this.title input value. And then we're going to use the add song function that just takes the title. So everything compiles. We can come over, testing, closed itself, created our new song, and we can go in here and edit things as we choose. That got us pretty far. Now we can actually create things, and we have some restriction on our routes. Not entirely. I'm going to leave the one extra route that is editing songs. I'm going to leave this up to you, but it's going to make more sense how you are going to structure this after we're done changing our data. But if we bounce over to the Firebase console and we take a look at the data, right now we have a songs hash that inside of it has all of our songs, and they all have unique IDs based on time, and that's fine. But who owns these, right? Like currently there's nothing that says who owns this. So this is what we're going to change. And the way we're going to change it is by actually setting another key under here that's going to be our user ID. And then we'll essentially have little mini databases for each person. And by doing that, we can ensure that I'm not accessing your information and you're not accessing mine until later on when we maybe want that to be a thing. And at that point, we can even abstract that out to where songs are marked public and then we put them in a different spot. And that can be something entirely different that we do. But for right now, let's just pretend that I want my information to be private all the time. So for that, we're going to need to get rid of these songs, actually. We're just going to delete, whoops, not the whole thing, actually. We're going to delete this. Delete songs. It's really sad, but they're going to go. And so now, all the changes that we need to make are going to be in app.js. So first one, add song. we're going to need to actually state who the owner of this is. So we're going to add an owner, and this is going to use this.state.currentUser.uid. And so that'll give us a little bit, but the more important part is how we actually prevent people from looking at the wrong songs. And this is where it's going to get a little bit funky. And we're going to take our songs ref, and we're going to move this into our auth handler. So this is basically saying, right, that somebody is authenticated, and since they've authenticated, we can go and fetch the songs, and we're going to fetch their very specific song database for them. So it'll be at songs/ and then their user ID. So at this point, we can do user.uuid, or UID, not UUID. So we can store that. And what this is saying is we want to sync the state from inside of Firebase that is sitting at /songs/ the user's identifier to songs on the application. And then since we're setting the ref whenever there is a user, we can effectively get rid of this when there's not a user. So we're going to take the same thing we do down here, that is the songs ref, and put that in here. So let's actually just see what happens when we do that. So right now there are no songs that can be found for us. And if we create this and we just call it testing, it goes off and it creates a song, and we can access it the same way. We didn't change anything else. We only changed that one area. But if we look here, we have songs, and then this is our UID. This is the ID of the song based on the time, its name, and then you'll notice that the owner is always, in this case, going to match up with the song ID. So just to show that this is working as we expect, I think I'm logged in with username and password right now. So if I log out and I log back in with my Facebook account, then I take a look at songs, I should see that there are no songs because I don't actually have one. So I'll create one for this person. So this is a test. And I look, I can add some stuff. And if we come back in here, you can see that these are two separate things. So testing exists under this user, and my Facebook user has the same sort of thing going on over here with this as a test, and they can't see those. They're none the wiser that those other songs exist. So we finally have data ownership inside of our application. So the last thing that we're going to do right now is we're going to finally fix our database so that it is secure. Because right now this isn't doing anything for us. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this to false. And then we want to come down here and we can say songs. So if you remember, we're going at /song, or like it's at songs/ the user's ID. Well, you can kind of pretend that this just goes all the way down. I don't know why this is indenting so funny. But so we're going to go to songs, and then we're going to say as kind of a string in the actual route that we have a UID. And then when we go down a little bit more, we want to say .write. You can actually write to something if the UID in the actual song path is equal to the authenticated person's UID. And then we're going to do the same thing with read. And so what this is going to do is this is going to ensure that we can actually open the simulator here. So let's say we run, it'll say that we are allowed to read, that's fine. Writing anything, we're not allowed to do it, that's fine too. And now let's say we want to do songs / I guess we'll make up some UID, it's not a real one here. If we run this, it'll say no because your UID doesn't match the authenticated. And then, so this is the user ID it's expecting. So if I run it again, it'll say permission is denied. But if I change this out to be the UUID down here and I run it, you'll say that we were permitted. So this actually works out. It's kind of a weird way of going about doing things, but you can see that when the person is authenticated, then they can have access to the songs that are underneath their own user authenticated token. So we're going to save this by publishing it. And now we actually have some real database security for our WebSocket-based application. And that brings us to the end of this particular tutorial. There's one thing that I'm going to leave up to you as the watcher here, and that is to turn this route into an authenticated route. And it's not going to work out exactly the same way because there's something interesting that goes on inside of this render function, right? We do this whole not found thing. So you might have to create your own type of authenticated route, which means, I mean, you could probably compose a new type of route with the authenticated route if you wanted to. But yeah, there's going to be a little bit more that you can do, but I would encourage you to use this as an experiment to try to write your own function that composes routes together in order to do the thing that you want in a more dynamic way, because odds are you're probably going to have these subpath sort of things in your applications more often than not. These are, RESTful routes. So if you can create a route that requires authentication and is RESTful, then that would be pretty awesome. So I'm going to leave that as something for you to do. I will actually do this on my own and push it up into the repo. So if you check out the code for this video, you'll be able to find how I did it. But I hope you enjoy working on that. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, be sure to leave a comment down below telling me why you liked it and what you're going to do with this knowledge. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get more of these tutorials each week. And also don't forget to join us on Patreon, Facebook, Slack, so you can keep the chat going, and on Twitter. But as always, have a nice week.